Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Change Your Mind podcast. I'm your host, Chris Ashley. We explore the intersection between personal development, spirituality, and science. And today we are going to talk about the importance of movement. First, a couple quick announcements. If you head over to the links in my show notes, you'll find a link to my book, Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality. It was endorsed by Bob Doyle, Michael Beckwith, Marcy Shimoff, all who were on The Secret. Also endorsed by John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. So go check it out. It's in paperback, ebook, audiobook. You'll also find links to my free downloads, my free masterclass, as well as ways to connect on social media, courses, coaching, all of the things. Please come be a part of the community. Stay connected. All right. Oh, and this podcast is also part of the Los Angeles Tribune Podcast Network. So we do a lot with personal development. So check us out. Check out all the other amazing podcasts that are part of the network. Okay, so with me today, I have Janis Isaman. Janis is a movement specialist based in Calgary, Canada. She is the founder of My Body Couture, a movement therapy studio that provides personalized training and rehabilitation services to clients with chronic pain, injuries, and other movement limitations. Janis has been working in the health and fitness industry for over 2 decades, and she has extensive training and experience in various movement modalities, including Pilates, yoga, and functional movement. So welcome, Janis.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have as someone who owns a yoga studio, I love talking about movement and the importance of it. I like to start all of my episodes the same way, and that is by asking my guests what their origin story is. What put you on this path in the first place and made you want to do this? So please share your story with us.
I love that question. A lot of my clients have the same question because a lot of people who do movement just really loved it. I am actually from the opposite world. So I was not an athletic kid. I do not come to any of this naturally. And so where I really began was when I went to post-secondary education, I decided to start running and quickly developed a pain in my knee. And I had been a kid who was more artistic than athletic. So I always just had this sense like something is different with my body. Something's wrong with my body. Why does this not work for me? It works for everyone else. And so I ended up doing what a lot of people do, which is going to various practitioners to try to help for my knee. And I was still a teenager and I couldn't walk up and down stairs. I couldn't sit and study. Everything was kind of painful. And I ended up going to a rolfer and a sports medicine doctor and my general practitioner and just all of these different places. And nobody could figure out how to make my knee different or better. And I would get some temporary relief and then it would come back the next time I went for a run. And, I became the practitioner that I wish that I'd had at that time. At that time, we are actually missing a bit of information, which was later discovered by the University of Calgary, that runner's knee is often caused by problems in your hip. So, if this happened today, I probably wouldn't have this career. But it set me off on a bit of a lifetime path to discover more information about my body. And it turns out I'm just a really, really, really average human being. But every time I would go into a class or tried something like a running program, it just seemed like my body didn't do what other people's bodies did. And so I really threw myself into trying to figure out how to make my body a comfortable experience to live in.
Thank you so much for sharing. I relate to your story. I was not an athletic kid at all, at all. I was definitely, I don't even know if I was artistic. I was a writer. I was a creative writer. That was my thing.
That counts as artistic.
I was a horseback rider, but the fact that I got into yoga at all is just crazy, when I think about it. So I totally relate to that. So okay. So how did you find, yoga and Pilates? How did you become a physical therapist? All of these things, what made you want to get those certifications finally?
So that actually was, that's how I found relief from my running pain in the first place. So it was a Pilates studio. And back in those days, they were few and far between. And I walked in and, saw all of these interesting movements that I'd never seen before. And my body actually loved it right away. And I actually had a fully separate career before I did this, but I remember this was kind of before vision boards were a thing. I actually had a little book and I cut magazine pictures out of things that I wanted. And that was one of my 10 things that I wanted. I wanted to own a Pilates studio. No idea really where that came from or why that was such a connecting point. But I basically proceeded with my life. I finished my degree. I have a business degree. I went and I worked in the marketing and media fields for quite a period of time. And this was kind of just running in the background. It was really my personal passion. And with all of these certifications, you actually have to do, as you would know, you have to do client hours. You can't just kind of attend the classes and get your certification. So I actually had to teach and I had to do exams. And I found that I really loved working with people and that I really loved solving problems in this way that I found so challenging. As I mentioned, I turn out to have a very average body, but I think a lot of the sports and athletic and training world is not actually set up for average people. It's really set up for athletic people who kind of get it from day one and they can coordinate it all and it all makes sense to them. And a lot of those instructions and the way that world is set up, I mean, gyms really come from the bodybuilding world and who was bodybuilding in the 1950s, but people that just really connected with that. They loved it. It made sense to them. They wanted to do it. It was their passion. And so I became really somebody who loved working with everyone else. So it's the other 85% of people that messaging doesn't actually make sense to. And the deeper I got into my training and working with clients, the more I just loved and loved and loved it. And then I added health coaching certifications and, all of these different pieces. But at the end of it, it was all really directed from my passions and my interests and what really caught my attention and just making it accessible and available to people. And at the end of the day, most people, let's say the cutoff age is like 35. That's a bit arbitrary, but most people over 35 have been told to go to the gym. We all know we're supposed to be doing this. And if we're not doing it, there's usually a reason. We don't like it. It doesn't make sense to us. We try it. We don't get any results. But a big driver is actually that our body's in pain. So we get people that try to go out for walks or try to do various classes, including yoga, and it hurts, like their back will hurt or their hamstring feels like it's ripping. And so that's really what I started helping people discover. And I did have as many people who kind of can tell this story. I had a client that actually really changed how I saw all of this. She came to me and had a childhood cancer, and she had to have surgery on her hips. The doctor said that she needed her shoulders replaced as well. And I worked with her twice a week for 2 years, and she never to this day has needed those surgeries. So that really became inspiration to me to start working more and more deeply into this level of people who have pain, people who have injuries, people who have kind of chronic conditions, and how I could help solve those in ways that were maybe not standard. So my goal for people is to get them moving. And that doesn't necessarily mean attending a body pump class or doing spin classes. It means the kind of movement that we want in our life. A lot of people say that that's very relationally driven. They want to be able to go on vacation with their family. They want to be able to be with their family or their friends and do fun things. And so that's really my driver, is it's because I wanted that in my own life as well.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. And it makes me think, like, historically, like when you think about the human body and how it's built, and like way back when we were, I don't even know, like nomads or cavemen or something, like how much is the human body meant to move in a day?
Well, I don't have a specific answer of how much we were meant to move, but I do have a specific answer of how much we did move. So there is evidence that shows that modern hunter-gatherers walk around 15 miles a day just to get food. So that's 15 miles or, just over 30 kilometers. And I'm going to repeat that, just to get food. So that's not entertainment. That's not for fun. That is to stay alive. And I've seen other research that says that ancient humans spent about 75% of their caloric intake just to get more calories. So not that long ago in our history, we really spent most of our time on our feet trying to survive. We spent most of our time literally looking in bushes for berries and planting vegetables and trying to catch small game and then processing that and working with that. So the human body was not meant to sit. And that is an area where I find that the vast majority of my clients kind of bump into problems. And it's not our fault. Everything is made very conveniently for us these days. We don't have to go out anywhere to get food. We can actually get it right to our door. We do not have to walk to socialize. We have cell phones that we can just press a single button and talk to people either on the phone or by a FaceTime or video call like this. We can get in our vehicle or get on public transit and go wherever we want to go. We can get on an airplane and go across the world. And so the average person gets most of their steps when they're on vacation. So most of us actually find that the amount that I just shared with you in terms of what it used to take to get food, that would be a monster day at Disney or a big day of touring Europe for most of us now. We're posting it all over social media. Like, look at this, I got, all these steps. But it's kind of a peak moment experience for us now, as opposed to just everyday living that we kind of have to do those things to stay alive.
Yeah, it's super fascinating to think about. And like, how many steps do you think the average person gets in a day?
There is research on this because most people now have something that counts the steps, and I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but I think it sits in the 4,000 to 5,000 steps per day range.
So what other impacts besides things like pain and stiffness does our modern lifestyle do to our bodies? Like what are the other impacts?
It has a huge impact on our digestive system. So the way that our digestive system actually works is the movement of the pelvis by way of walking. That's actually what gives us motility of our intestinal systems. So that is actually meant to move. It's meant to sort of kind of think about a washing machine. It's got that sort of cyclical impact on it. And so a lot of modern humans actually have a lot of digestive issues because we're sitting a lot. So not only do we have our upper body pressure down on that area, but then we're not actually moving it. And so it's fairly common to actually have people that come in to see me that have significant digestive issues. And that ranges from they don't go to the bathroom to indigestion to they're literally just not processing their food properly.
Yeah. You mentioned knee pain from running earlier is often caused by hips. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how different body parts are connected in that kind of
So we often, when we learn in junior high or high school about our own bodies, which is very minimal, we often really learn about it from the framework of you look in a textbook and there's a discrete muscle and we memorize the muscle name, and then there's a bone and we memorize that name, and we think of them as really, really separate. But in actual fact, the whole thing is way less separated than what you might think. So if you ever watch a dissection video, which they are available online, that where one muscle ends and the next begins is definitely less concrete than what we actually learn. And so that's the first thing, is that it's more of a flow. It's the same way that, if you think about driving across the United States, you see a sign that's you're in a state, but it's not like everything changes. It's not like there's actually a color shift or like a massive shift in the geography. Kind of just flows from one to the other. And, if you're driving, as you go, that geography is going to shift. So when you go from California to the Midwest, somewhere along there, there's actually quite a significant geographical shift. But where that actually happens is way less delineated than kind of like, oh, we're entering Nevada. Now it's all different. So the body's
I like that.
The body's basically the same as that. So, we all know that there's a difference between your foot and your hand, but where does that shift occur? It's less solid than the textbooks would have you believe. And then we also have connective tissue that's running through the whole body. So much of our knowledge is really based on muscle, but what is actually tying everything together is connective tissue. So there's something called fascia, which used to be described as kind of, the skin over top of a chicken breast. And that is true. That kind of creates what we think of as muscle, but it also goes through all of your fibers. And there's channels that run all the way up and down through your body. And they run in different patterns than the muscles. So they're not just kind of like big chunks of things that are kind of stuck together. So you've got almost ribbons running through the body. And we have a lot of communication between the muscle groups and between the different elements. So there's a lot in our body that's about coordination. And most of us, again, are kind of thinking of coordination as like if somebody throws a ball, you're going to catch it and we're good. Coordination in this sense really means your brain says, I'm going to stand up right now. And 15 or 20 different things have to happen for you to be able to stand up. And most of the time, we don't have to think about that at all, unless you're in pain, and then maybe you do. But coordinating all of that is actually a lot related to your fascia. So that's the tissue that's going to make it elasticize, and that's going to have everything flowing from one muscle group to the next. And that's an area where a lot of us get really tight and really stuck.
First of all, I love your state line metaphor. That's like one of the coolest metaphors, and it totally makes sense. And like also just, there's so much of modern medicine. It's like people specialize in things, and that's never made sense to me because it's like you want to look at the body as a whole, right? Yeah. So when we're talking about fascia, does it actually convey like messages? Like, is there like electric messages happening? Yeah. Talk to me more about that. Cause it's super fascinating. Like I've always been told like, it's like the white stuff and the orange, but you know what I'm talking about? Like the stuff that you like pick out, but no, it's interesting because your fascia can get more flexible too, right? Like, talk to me about fascia. Cause it's super, super fascinating.
Yeah, so fascia is actually, it's a quote unquote newer discovery of the body from a Western scientific standpoint, although it is not new in traditional Chinese medicine. So if you are familiar with acupuncture, they're really working on those channels, and they're called meridian lines. So they're working on the communication of your toe to your finger, basically. And so throughout your body, where you're getting acupuncture, the needles are put into, they're called meridian lines, and that's going to help unlock and unleash all of the communication in the channels. From a Western scientific standpoint, much more recently, like we're talking in the last 20 years, there was a scientist who was dissecting and realized that some of the tissue that he'd only ever seen in a preserved body looked different when he worked with a body that had not had that fermentation, that so what's the word? Formaldehyde applied to it. And so that kind of set off a whole discovery of what is actually happening in the body. He discovered that there are communications, and there is a whole channel that is it's moving most of the fluid through the whole body. So the fluid that many of us think of are going to be your blood and your lymph, but your fascia is actually moving more fluid through the body than either of those items are. So so one of the most important elements of the body is actually our hydration. So we are basically just big squish balls in meat sacks that are filled with fluid. So most of our body is fluid. And what happens for a lot of us is that we actually kind of get dried out. And to be really specific, one of the things that is making your fascia hydrated is something called hyaluronic acid. So most of us are kind of familiar with that. If you are buying beauty products, that is in your beauty products. So you can apply it topically to the skin. And the reason that it's in beauty products is because it attracts and retains approximately 1,000 times its body weight in water. So you put that on your skin, then you put on some lotion, and whoop, away go your fine lines and wrinkles. That's happening inside your body as well. However, we have a lot less hyaluronic acid at age 40 than we did at age 15. It's a huge thing that shifts as we age. So as we age, many of us will kind of wake up with like, quote unquote, aches and pains and creaks and things that just don't feel that great in our body. And our hyaluronic acid and collagen are largely responsible for that. So that's going to give your tissue that stretch, that elasticity, and it's going to help it communicate with the other tissues. So when we go to stand up, that the muscle coordination and then that communication can just happen really smoothly. We all know what it feels like when if you drink too much or you're dehydrated, it just kind of feels bad. So that happens naturally as you age. And that's where we really, a lot of us could use work on keeping that tissue elastic and stretchy and communicating and all of that fluid moving through the body.
Thank you so much for teaching me all of that. I love learning about the body. It's so fascinating. So when someone is in pain, is it often caused by this like drying out and stiffness of the fascia? And then like, how do you get that stretchiness back? Like, do you do it by supplementing with collagen or whatever you
hyaluronic acid?
Hyaluronic acid. I'm like, I can see it spelled out, but I've never said it out loud before. Or is it through movement modalities? Like, what do you recommend?
So when someone's in pain, there's often kind of, from my lensing, there's two things that are really causing, quote unquote, the pain. One is a lack of hydration, and that's going to be that hyaluronic acid and collagen and that stretchiness. And the second is lack of space. So if you think about literally taking your finger and pressing it down into your hand, that kind of hurts, right? Versus pulling it out. That's going to feel like, I have some space in there. So as people sit, we lose space in the joint. You literally lose space at your hips. You lose space in your spine. So it's quite common to get back pain because there's no space left in there.
I think
those two things are often related. So losing space and losing hydration are kind of interrelated. So then it's a matter of, okay, how do we actually create that space and how do we get that springiness back in the tissue? And I have a couple of techniques that I like to do, but I lens things through movement. And so I don't think personally that you're ever going to kind of create that springiness in the space in the body through injections or through supplements or through just, you can't kind of apply it topically and hope that it's going to do what movement's going to do. Human bodies are meant to move, period. That's a full sentence. We have to move to get this. So once we are in pain, you're going to need to do some specific therapeutic modalities. Yin yoga is great for developing that hyaluronic and collagen creating space in the body. There's a technique that I love called Yamana body rolling that's going to kind of give you space back at the joints. Those aren't the only things that exist. I do personally supplement with these things as well. I do take hyaluronic acid and collagen. But I do those in combination with the movement therapies. So I don't think that you can hope to just have it kind of applied to you. You have to actually get up and do what the human body was meant to do.
Yeah. And yeah, that's so interesting. And like also like all kinds of movement, right? Like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
Not just like sitting and lifting weights and like doing the same thing over and over. Like we're meant to like run and walk and lift and bend and reach, right?
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Oh, I think that is actually such a super important thing to say, because I think that there are a percentage of people that go to the gym and they focus on, these things are great, strength training or cardiovascular health. That's awesome. But at the end of the day, what most people do the most is sit and stand and walk. And if you're not doing those things more than going to the gym, you need to start. So, we can't overcome sitting for 8 hours in a block. You can't go to the gym and outrun that. So you need to be standing up from your desk. You need to be sitting down. You need to be walking around, that I'm not a huge fan of like you have to walk 10,000 steps. There's actually new research that shows that the magic number for like longevity is 8,000 steps twice a week. But that's still, that's going to exceed what the average person is actually doing in a week. So you need to just find a way to get more steps in. And that could be anything. Like I get steps in by just sort of quote unquote wasting time. It's not efficient for me to walk to the post office, but it helps me get those steps in because our modern world is created in such a way that I literally don't have to, right? So I think that you have to walk and you have to sit and stand. And if you have a desk job, that means that you have to stand up, and you can sit right back down again, but you just have to get those fluid and the tissues and everything kind of moving. And you have to do that throughout the day.
Yeah. And 8,000 steps twice a day doesn't sound like a lot to me, or twice a week. I mean, doesn't sound
it's not.
Like
it's
only
not.
twice a week.
Yeah, no, I know. It's not even the 10,000 steps a day that we were kind of arbitrarily told. And it just shows you like how the human body actually doesn't need that much to actually thrive. It wasn't, we're lucky as a species. We can kind of get away with a lot in the body and still make it all work out. People can eat pizza for a year and not have any kind of negative side effect from that, etc. So that's your minimum. And just going out for a couple of walks a few times a week is going to give you that longevity piece. It's going to give your tissues what they actually need, that's great news. That's the best news, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. I mean, and walking is so therapeutic, like emotionally too.
Yes.
Which actually kind of brings me to the next thing I wanted to talk about is like how do you see emotions being tied into pain and stiffness and ailments in the body?
Well, so that's a great question. So every time we have an emotion, we have a muscular response. So as you and I are sitting talking, our faces are creating responses, and it kind of does that without your permission. So if I'm disgusted by something, it's going to show on my face. There's going to be a muscular reaction. So we can change our thoughts. We can do all kinds of emotional work, but at the end of the day, your muscles are still going to have a response. And in our society, we actually we talk about this in a couple of ways that I love. So the one is you have butterflies in your stomach. So most of us can kind of call that idea to mind, but what's actually happening there is you get tightening of the intestines, you get shortening of the psoas or the hip flexor muscle. The other one that I love is that something is a pain in the ass or a pain in the butt. So that's where, again, the glute muscles will kind of tighten up. The sit bones will kind of draw a little bit closer together. So quite often what will happen is when we have really strong emotions, our body will do a lot of internal rotating. So if you think about, and that could include being warm and cozy. So if you think about the winter time and you want to be comforted, you kind of curl up into a little ball. So we make ourselves smaller, our shoulders roll in, we'll often pull our hips in towards us. So that even is a comfortable emotion. But when we feel stressed, we can have a lot of emotional response to that too. So something that's really common is pulling the shoulders up into the ears when we feel a lot of stress. The two biggest areas I think that people really have a strong emotional somatic response are in the shoulders and in the stomach. And the reason for that is because the two most exposed areas of our body from a skeletal standpoint are our neck and our torso. So if you think about, your arm, if I was to take a knife and hit my arm, we would hit bone there pretty quickly. That's not true in your viscera, in your stomach, and it's not true in your neck. So our body has a really strong protective mechanism of our stomach and our neck. So when something feels a little bit icky, we kind of become like a cat. Cat will arch its back. We'll lift our shoulders. We'll jut our head forward. We'll do a lot to kind of get the neck out of the way. And same thing at the abdomen. So the whole torso will just kind of shrink. That's a really protective thing that is happening. But a lot of us are having that response and not even actually being aware that it's happening. So, and your emotions in your body are one thing. So although we've medicalized it and said we go to the doctor for our body and we go to the psychiatrist for our brain, it's one system. So it's really what we were talking about earlier, where that whole system is working in coordination with each other, and you can't separate it out. There is no way to actually kind of smile and make yourself happy if you're not actually happy. I can do the facial movement, but it doesn't mean that anything has actually changed emotionally in the body. But vice versa, when I'm scared, the hair on your arms are going to jump up. Maybe your shoulders are going to jump up. You're going to have a really strong somatic response. And then doing that over and over and over and over again without sort of flushing those emotions through or having that pause moment or having any downtime, that's where we can actually get into pain, because our muscles are just like an animal. If a cat was walking around all the time with its back arched, you'd have to take that cat to the vet. Like something is wrong, right? But a lot of us are kind of living in that heightened state of like fear, emergency, stress. And then it's just too much for your muscles. It creates lack of space. We get that tightness, we get pain, and away we go.
I really appreciate everything you just said. And, we've had so many conversations on this podcast about, how pain is tied to repressed emotions or mindset and all these things. But it's really interesting to hear it just from like purely a body standpoint. And everything you said makes a lot of sense. I've also heard of like you tuck the tailbone a little bit, kind of like a scared dog. Like it's protective. And as you were talking, I was thinking like, wow, this is like my dialogue when I teach camel pose, right? Like, or when people come out of it, I have them sit in meditation. It's like, because those heart openers can bring up a lot for people, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, it's like from a biological standpoint, like we don't want to open the front side of our body. That's where our vital organs are. That's like a vulnerable place to be. And I like that you touched on, if we're constantly sitting all day, like there's this compression that's going to happen. And then if we're stressed on top of that, which most people are, then there's this like rounding and tightening and shortening of muscles, at least in the front side of the body, that's going to happen. And it's like, no wonder people are having back pain and neck pain and shoulder pain and all these things. Like it's so clear, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, end of the day, we're living in a manner that's really divorced from the way that we were born to adapt to. So, most of us, if you strip out the city where we live in, look at the ground underneath you, you would have been walking on that terrain. You would have been searching around on that terrain for food, hunting, gathering, eventually cultivating crops. And those kind of modern stressors wouldn't have been peaking out every second. Many of us, every time we check our email or pick up our phone, there's a million things that are kind of popping up that feel like severe emergencies. So we don't even have to wander into the world of trauma to kind of see that we're living in a way that we didn't adapt to. So there isn't really any way to remove all the flooring and remove all the sidewalks and remove all the shoes and kind of go back to all of that. And most of us wouldn't want to anyways, but we probably do need some sort of practice. And I also am a fan of yoga for that, to just have some time where we chill out and we move our body in a more directed way to release some stress and to bring our nervous system down and to do some movements that maybe don't feel supernatural, like opening our chest. We don't currently have to do anything that's ever super awkward or uncomfortable with our body, but I can assure you, if you had to drag a buffalo, you would have to do some things that we currently don't ever have to do with our body. So we don't even have to go to super extremes, but you mentioned this a while ago, you're squatting, you're lunging, you're throwing, you're twisting, you're rotating. All of those things were just part of how we moved. And so look, that's again, another reason why I love yoga, because we incorporate a lot of those movements, which are quite natural to the human body. And they're not always going to feel comfortable.
Yeah, totally. you said something and I wanted to comment on it because I really liked it. And I have like serious pregnancy brain right now and it totally just flew out. But how much movement should someone get in a day, like the average person? And I know it's hard to say average person. Let's say most of my listeners are in their 30s and 40s. So how much movement should someone in their 30s or 40s get in a day?
I'm going to give a really specific answer. More than you're doing. So most people are getting not enough steps. So that's the first place that I actually recommend that you look at is just get some more steps. And it doesn't have to be in a concrete exercise way or a specific movement modality. Just find ways that you can walk a little bit more. And that could be, I know this is always the example given, but it's because it's a decent one. Park a little bit further than you need to from where you're going. Walk an extra 5 minutes. Go walk to your coworker's office instead of calling them or emailing them. Make sure that at lunchtime you're actually standing up. Lots of people now are eating at their desk, and I had a desk job. I get it. I know why that's happening, but take that 5 to 10 minutes and just walk around your office or go out on the street or go to a park or go somewhere. So that's always the first place to start because it's usually the easiest. We can take whatever your step count is and aim to double it. And that's not going to happen in a week, but look at what you're doing over a year. 99% of us have phones that are tracking your data. So it's super easy just to go into your health data, check how many steps you did in 2023, and then make it a goal to double that in 2024. Then in terms of kind of, your more formalized exercise programs, there is a benefit to doing specific strength training and cardio and flexibility training programs. There's a reason that those are recommended. So ideally, we want to aim for kind of 2 of those a week. That's, again, a really big stretch for a lot of people to start with. So even if you can try to get 4 a month, find a yoga studio, find a gym, find a personal trainer, find a clinician or somebody that you like working with, find a friend and, decide that you're going to do 1 class a week. Then after 6 months, if that's sustainable for you, see if you can add a second and find something that you love to do. Some people riding the bike, some people like going to the gym, some people like strength training, some people prefer yoga. So it's going to be something that you're like, I really like this. And it can be really anything. So, if you want to relax, you can try a yin. If you want to do something more active, you can go to your studio. If you just don't want anything to do with gyms or programs, call a friend and say, do you want to go for a walk once a week and get kind of that bigger piece. So I always start with where someone is. And we never want to go past the point where we can sustain it. So it does not do the human body any good to take on a program in New Year's resolution style is the most common way to do it. And we see that throughout the year. It's like, okay, next week I'm going to do 7 days a week. That doesn't help you if you can't stick with it. So I'm really big on do the smallest applicable amount. And the reality is most people don't have a ton of time. So it is take a look at what you're doing now and add 10%. Add 10% a month until you're like, I can't do this anymore. And then stop there. And then just repeat. And as we age, we need more programs that sustain the body and less programs that look to buzz energy out of the body. So to be really specific, we're going to be looking more as we age towards things like a yoga as opposed to a spin class. And that is, of course, individual. But most people who are, 40 don't just sit around saying, I just have so much energy. I'm so restless. I don't know what to do with all this energy. We typically are looking for that energy and feeling like a little bit tired and maybe burned out. So that's where you're going to do a more restorative program. That's going to help give your body that balance. And you're more likely to actually continue it than a program where you're like, I really pushed, I hate it. I need tons of motivation to go. So that's really, there probably is a more scientific answer, but science doesn't matter if you're doing nothing or if you're getting 2,000 steps a day. That 8,000 steps may take you 3 years to actually kind of build into your life. And that's okay.
I like that answer because it feels really manageable. right? It doesn't feel like scary or overwhelming or like, because if you tell someone like you need to work out 5 days a week, like some people just shut down,
Yeah.
right? And just to go back to what you're saying about like, if you're in your 40s and you're feeling burnt out and tired, to do something restorative, like yoga can give you energy too. Which is
Yes.
amazing, right? It's like I feel like the more you're active, the more energy you have. Like they go hand in hand together. Right? It's like when you're just sitting around, like you just get so lethargic and
Yes.
it's just like such a chore to like get up and get started. But as you start doing these things, you feel better. And I also like that you say, like, do the program that feels good to you, that you like doing, right? Because you're gonna want to keep doing it. Like, that's what drew me to yoga is I felt so damn good after.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, for the first time, my mind is clear. My body feels like I'm floating. Like this is like addicting, right? I want this feeling. And I like kept chasing that high. And then it was like, oh, I'm like I would just go whenever I felt drawn to my mat, which became like every day. But then I have reached those points where I'm like, oh, this is too much of my body. So it's like,
Yeah,
it's super smart to listen to your body too.
absolutely. And I do want to mention that there is some research that shows it takes on average 6 weeks to start seeing results from a new program. And the average person actually quits at week 5. So quite often we're actually quitting before we kind of start to feel the results in our body. There, of course, are exceptions. There are people who maybe had more of a history of working out and it just feels like, I can just drop back into this. But the average person takes a while to actually start to feel or notice or discover those shifts in the body, and they might actually be a little bit more subtle. So we're kind of seeing a lot of magic happening on Instagram where we see the before and after pictures and these big dramatic things. It might not feel like that to you. It might, and that's great, and you can post that story and get involved in that. But a lot of people, it's more exactly what you just said. You're just feeling a bit more energy. You feel a little bit more mental clarity. You notice that you can get a few more things done in a day. You notice that you're maybe a little bit less stressed out. So I really like to frame this in the sense of there's black and there's white. So when we have a black shape in front of us, that might be something like body pain. We can usually identify where it is. It has a black shape. We can notice that. When that goes away, it's really hard to notice a white object, white space. So what we're often looking for out of fitness programs and out of nutrition programs, things like that, are actually the white space where we just can run our life without noticing the body. So we might have something where we notice, I have more energy, but you might also have to go back in your mind 6 months to notice like the difference between the two. And then we really quickly forget what the old us felt like. So unless you're a professional or blogging or doing Instagram posts, it can be really hard to remember what it felt like to not have energy and to not have mental clarity and to be kind of flustered all day and to not get through your to-do list. So I always tell people to look for that white space, that white shape in front of us, which is a lot more subtle. It's a lot harder to pick up on. And we're not necessarily looking for that quote unquote body transformation. We're looking to feel good and we're looking to have our body running in the background, the engine that's just running our life behind us. We don't have to notice or think about it all day. But that actually takes
I like that
a
lot.
lot of work. It takes a lot of work to actually to get it just running smoothly without us having to notice it.
No, I like the idea that the goal is to like basically forget the body, right? Like in terms of stress and aches and pains. Awesome. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of this. I'm sure it was super helpful for all the listeners. And I'd love for you to let people know how they can work with you, where they can find you, where you are on the internet, what your offers are, all the things.
For sure. So my business name is My Body Couture, which is 3 words, my, M-Y, body, B-O-D-Y, couture, C-O-U-T-U-R-E. So you can find me at the .com or any social media site where I exist. I'm under My Body Couture. You're welcome to reach out and to, of course, follow or engage and just reach out if you have any questions or comments or if you love this episode.
Do you work with people online, or
I
is
do.
it in person? Okay.
Yeah. So I have an in-person studio, and then I also work with people digitally.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. And thank you again for coming on and educating all of us. And listeners, please like, comment, share, subscribe. If there's someone in your life who you feel could really benefit from this information, please send it to them. And I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.